I guess we'll start. Hello, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Anna Howard, and I'm the Senior Manager of Academic Initiatives here at the AICPA. We are excited to continue our new academic webinar series, Faculty Hour. We have a next one planned already. It's on the books for Friday, April 30th at 2 p.m. Maybe I will ask my producer, Anna, to provide a registration link in the chat in case you want to register for the next one as well. Before I get to today's agenda, I have a couple of housekeeping items. Please ask the questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many as we can. This 90-minute webinar qualifies for a free 1.5 CPEs as long as you answer the 6 polling questions, and we will announce them as they come up. At the end of the webinar, there will be a quick survey, and we hope you help us by filling it out. And now for today's Faculty Hour program. We have a busy agenda today, which includes a CPA Evolution update and discussion about the use of data analytics in audit practice and the way to teach it in the classroom. The speakers today, my colleague Carl Mays is the AICPA's Associate Director of CPA Quality and Evolution. He's the project lead for Enhancing Audit Quality, EAQ initiative, and he manages CPA Evolution initiative, on which he will provide an update today. To lead the discussion on the use of data analytics and auditing, we invited Meredith Piotti, who is a CPA and a certified internal auditor. She's a principal with Wolf & Company in Boston, Massachusetts. Now I would like to turn it over to Carl for a CPA Evolution update, and we will probably have our first polling question at this time.
All right, so thanks so much, Anna. And thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. Really appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on where we're at with CPA Evolution. And I'm sure, like many others, I'm really looking forward to learning about how data analytics in an audit context are being incorporated into academic curriculum. So for those who haven't been able to join us on past faculty hours, just a quick little rundown on CPA Evolution. If you're interested in more background, I'd encourage you to go to evolutionofcpa.org. And we have a whole presentation on there, with how we got to where we are today. But CPA Evolution is a combined NASBA AICPA initiative aimed at evolving initial CPA licensure to reflect the skills and knowledge that CPAs increasingly need in the marketplace today. Really important to point out, it's the regulators working with the profession, and it's focused on CPA, initial CPA licensure. So once you become a CPA, it's effectively the same as it is today, but that path up to licensure changes under this model. And this is our new model for the CPA. It's a core plus discipline model. The core has robust coverage of accounting, audit, tax, and technology. And then, each candidate would be required to select one discipline in tax compliance and planning, business analysis and reporting, or information systems and controls. And then regardless of which discipline they select, they become a fully licensed CPA with all the rights and responsibilities of any other CPA. So for example, if somebody takes the core, they take that tax discipline, and ultimately they decide they want to work in audit, they have the ability to do that so long as they have the competency to do that work. So like I mentioned, lots of additional information available on our website. around that. But good news is CPA Evolution is moving forward. AICPA's Governing Council has voted to advance it, overwhelmingly voted to advance the initiative, and NASBA's board of directors did the same. So if you're, seeing things as you go through the transition process, because we really are in that implementation mode now, building out the new exam and helping academia through events like this, encourage you to reach out to feedback@evolutionofcpa.org. I personally read every one of those emails, and we're always interested in your feedback. So the rest of this presentation will be on, some newer material. We'll talk about the exam and what the exam might look like. We'll talk about some feedback that we got relative to candidates, so some survey data that we've gathered around candidates. And then we'll talk about some, things that we've learned from an academic perspective as well. Now, the impact on states, we'll spare you guys that one today. Not a whole lot to update other than lots of good work being done around getting those rules changed and getting the statutes changed in the states where that's necessary. I think it's 8 total states where that's necessary. But let's start with the exam. So the most common question that we get around the exam, especially from faculty, is what kind of content might appear on this new exam? What's it going to look like? So this slide and the subsequent slides provide some directional thinking. Now, I just want to emphasize this is subject to practice analysis. The CPA exam is defined by the practice analysis that they conduct, where they go out and reach out, to focus groups and surveys and so on, to hundreds, if not thousands, of folks to get their input on what should live on that CPA exam and what's necessary to protect the public at the 1 to 2 year experience level. But this is some initial thinking to share with you guys. So the idea with information systems and controls, that discipline, is that it's targeted to candidates who are interested in various roles around assurance and advisory services. And the subject matter that we think may be covered in that area are things like IT governance, data governance, IT risk assessment, information security, tests of internal controls, and then those system and organization control engagements. So, we'll talk a little bit more about that subject matter here in a moment. From a business analysis and reporting perspective, when we think about that discipline, again, directional thinking, but we're thinking about folks who may be interested in a traditional financial statement audit position or somebody who's planning on working in business and industry. And these are people who need a good understanding of data analytics, which we'll be talking about today. So great, segue there. But we're not just talking about, kind of base data analytics like maybe we've seen in audits in the past. I know I, as an auditor and as a member of the peer review team for years at the AICPA, it's kind of, you got column 1, you've got column 2, and then you look at the variance. Here we're talking about things like data modeling, data visualization, ETL, understanding the different types of data analysis, predictive analysis, descriptive analysis, and so on. So those are the types of things that we're looking at there. More advanced financial accounting topics. So, a lot of schools, I think virtually all schools, have an advanced accounting course. You can kind of think of those topics as topics that we're envisioning living in BAR. Financial management, operations management, emerging reporting frameworks. So that might be things like integrated reporting and ESG, and then state and local government deep dive. And the thought there is we still cover state and local government in some degree at kind of a conceptual level within the core, but then we do a deeper dive, just like we do on the current FAR exam within BAR. And then thinking about tax compliance and planning and what might be covered there, we're talking about candidates who might be interested in various roles that are concentrated in compliance, tax compliance or planning, or in financial planning. So that's a little bit different. So here we're talking about more advanced topics like AMT, estate and gifts, consolidated returns, things like that. But we're also talking about that personal financial planning piece. And this is not, guys, just, how do you balance a checkbook or how do you balance your budget? We're talking about retirement planning and so on. That's a space that 90,000 CPAs work in. And we want to make sure that the competencies that are needed to work in that space are coming through our licensure process. So, that's just kind of a high level overview of what might be covered in those different areas. Ultimately, we feel like this sets us up for our future. The World Economic Forum 2020 report kind of lays out these are the emerging roles and, rows of increasing demand. And then these are kind of the declining roles and roles with decreasing demand, and accounting consistently makes the top 5 among those declining roles. But when we look at emerging roles, we're looking at things like data analysis, information security, digital transformation, and risk management. And these are all areas that we envision increasing the emphasis on in this future exam. So things to be aware of. And then last slide here on exam. And this gets to timing. So the practice analysis is currently underway. We're doing those surveys, doing the focus groups, and getting the feedback. And the information that I've shared today will evolve as that practice analysis goes on. The plan is to have an exposure draft in mid-2022. So that's when the blueprint comes out, and you get a good understanding of what might be on the next exam. By January or very early 2023, the plan is to finalize that blueprint with the goal of launching the new exam in January of 2024. So if there's one date, guys, to remember from this presentation, it's January of 2024. Everything else kind of works back from that. So just be aware that that's out there. And then, a few new slides around candidates. We recently did a survey, and folks on the call may have helped us get this survey out, or may have responded to the faculty portion of the survey, and we appreciate that. And really, we were just trying to set a baseline here to get a good understanding of familiarity with CPA evolution, interest in pursuing CPA, and so on. So we're still slicing and dicing that data, but I wanted to provide some high-level takeaways for you guys while we're all here on the line. So the first question that we asked of candidates is, how familiar are you with the AICPA and NASBA CPA Evolution Initiative? And really what we heard was they're not. About 27% said they're either very familiar or somewhat familiar, and everybody else was lower than that. And really that's not a surprise to us. Our primary communication efforts have been focused on state boards and helping them make those changes that they need to make. And then yourselves, faculty, and helping faculty understand, some of the transition, implications associated with CPA evolution. But starting in 2021, we really are going to focus on this audience more. We want to make sure that those freshmen and those sophomores understand what's happening in the profession and, can see themselves in that profession. And then those, seniors and graduate students and so on, we want to make sure that they understand that it's a January of 2024 date. So they should just go ahead and pursue that exam, get that exam banged out, and move along their candidate journey. So, one of the best ways we found through the survey data to reach these students is through faculty. So we'd really encourage you guys to let candidates know, your students within your classes, from principals all the way up, that this is happening and, what it means for the profession. One other takeaway for candidate purposes from that pulse survey, so we asked the candidates to rank the disciplines in the order in which they are most likely to pursue them. So what we saw was 25% said they're most likely to pursue ISC, 53% said they're most likely to pursue bar, and then 22% said most likely to perform TCP. So a couple takeaways on that. First of all, we asked the same question of faculty, when you consider your students, which area do you think they're most likely to pursue? And the data was very similar. It was around 25, 50, and 25 for that group. So, there was some consistency there. Also interesting to think about, as students become more familiar with what would be covered in ISC and how that might set you up to do, SOX 404 work or risk assurance type work. And as they become more familiar with TCP and the fact that it's going to include a lot more planning focus versus just the compliance aspect, be interesting to see how those numbers evolve with time. But wanted you to be aware of those as you go and think about transition within your programs. And then the last area, and certainly the most important for this audience, is academic implications here. So let's spend a moment on this. First, we mentioned this back in January, but for those who weren't available, we are working on a model curriculum. It's going to use the same starting point, guys, as the 2024 CPA exam. Now, the CPA exam is, taking that mapping that was kind of developed by the exam team, by volunteer leadership, and putting it through the ringer, and really, analyzing it through all of those focus groups and surveys and so on. What we've done is we've used that same starting point and had over 40 task force meetings Anna, shoot me if I'm wrong here. I think it's over 40 task force members, around 20 practitioners, 20 faculty
That's
members.
correct.
Yeah, and digging into all the way down to the topical and the learning objective level. What are the learning objectives that we think should be associated with the core? What are the learning objectives that we think should be associated with each one of those disciplines? And I think that was one of the early questions in the Q&A, was, will it be broken out in that way? And the answer is yes. That is the intent, to lay that out by discipline, and then relative to the core. We'll also include in that model curriculum, when it launches, some high-level recommendations on how you might want to set up your program, which courses you might consider offering. And that'll be based on feedback both from AICPA and NASBA leadership, but also from the faculty who are serving on those task forces. And the goal ultimately is to launch that model curriculum in June of 2021. It's listed as a goal, but it will launch in June of 2021. So looking forward to, launching that and getting feedback from the folks out there listening. The next thing that I'll talk about here is the curriculum gap analysis. So we did discuss this previously. The goal here was to reach out to accounting department heads and get an understanding of what's being taught today within accounting programs. So we sent a survey to over 1,200 department chairs. We heard back from, I think it's 317, it was over 300. And we asked them about a handful of different areas that we anticipate will be increasingly emphasized on the next exam, and are certainly being increasingly emphasized within firms. So the next couple slides will walk through that analysis. So we asked about data analytics. What percentage of the faculty or what percentage of the accounting programs out there are teaching data analytics in any way? 51% of smaller schools, 1 to 50 undergrads, said they're teaching that, and then over 70% for 50 plus. This was kind of interesting because, as we'll talk about this afternoon from an audit perspective, analytics are one of the primary ways that you're gathering evidence through your audit. You've got substantive testing, tests of controls, and analytics. So interesting that we ended up with that response there. Much lower coverage for the other areas here on the slide. Predictive analytics, 30 to 50% there. System and organization control engagements, we've got 17 to 32%. And then digital acumen. So this is, understanding digital trends in technology and how they impact business. Many of us may have seen in the Wall Street Journal a non-fungible token, I think it was 2 weeks ago, sold for $69 million. So what is a non-fungible token? Just having an understanding of that type of stuff, it's effectively a bunch of letters and numbers that sold for millions and millions of dollars. So what does that mean for business? Those types of insights. So I think what we're seeing certainly on this slide is opportunities for us to fill gaps that exist out there. These are areas that, again, we expect will be covered on the next exam. Very little coverage out there among the faculty who responded to that survey. And generally, what we're hearing, other than data analytics, is these are being covered in 1 to 2 class sessions, often within the AIS course. So we want to make sure that there's sufficient coverage to prepare somebody for the demands of practice in these areas. Similar takeaways with respect to cybersecurity and IT audit, IT governance, and IT risk. IT audit has more coverage, between 60 and 68%, but cyber and IT governance, IT risk, all covered between 30 and 40-ish%. We want to make sure that over the next few years, years, those numbers are going up. We're getting increasing coverage on these areas that are of increasing importance to the profession, and we're committed to aiding the academic community in that. So you can see our next poll question has popped up here, and it says, how familiar are you with the CPA Evolution initiative? Really interested to hear everybody's responses to that poll. So, just kind of wrapping up this gap analysis and thoughts around the gap analysis. And for those who are interested in accessing a report on the gap analysis, it was just issued, I think yesterday. I think we issued a press release and it's up on our website. So please feel free to go and check that out. But onto this next slide. So, we conducted that poll survey, and what we asked, one of the things that we asked was, are there plans to increase the emphasis on some of those areas that we just talked about with the gap analysis, as well as some other areas that we were interested in? So SOC engagements, you can see, there was about 20% of schools that teach it at all, and about 7% or so are saying they plan to increase the emphasis on SOC engagements. So we want to see that number go up, and we're committed to working with the faculty throughout the country to work on that with the textbook providers and so on. Personal financial planning, we talked about, that's a new area for the exam, for that TCP section. Anecdotally, we hear there's not a whole lot of coverage of that today, and in terms of intent to increase emphasis on that, not a whole lot of intent to increase emphasis. So again, an area for us to focus on. IT governance and information process controls and so on, very similar. The one area where we see more intent to cover and increase coverage is data visualization and data analytics, types of data analytics. And I think some of that is driven by accreditation requirements. There's some accreditors that kind of push their accredited institutions to focus on data analytics. That's a great thing, very well aligned with CPA Evolution. But overall, some substantive gaps for us to try to cover here over the next few years. And how do we fill those? Well, I think it starts with the textbook publisher outreach. I literally just presented this morning with Dan Dustin from NASBA for McGraw-Hill, and we've reached out to Pearson, we've reached out to Wiley and to others. I think it's making sure that those textbooks that so many folks use are up to speed and are teaching the things that are most relevant. We'll build out that academic resource hub. So we talked about back in January, the resource hub covers, I think, over 200 resources, maybe 220 resources today in areas like data analytics and predictive analytics and cybersecurity. So we'll continue to build that out so that folks have the resources that they need to teach these topics. We'll continue to have these faculty hour webcasts and encourage you guys to come back every month for the updates and for the upskilling, discussions that we'll have. And where it's applicable, it'll be free with CPE. And then AICPA certificate programs. And just to talk for a moment about that, we offer these certificate programs. You can see over the right, if you can read that, and I know it's tiny, the price for faculty to, get one of these certificates is extremely low in comparison to its base price. Being the accountant and the nerd that I am, I went through and calculated the price in comparison to the base price for every one of them, and all of them are at least 65% off. One of them is actually 85% off. So you can see down in the bottom left, thiswaytocpa.com/certificate programs. If you're interested in doing a deep dive into data analytics, into cybersecurity, data visualization, some of these other areas, we've got resources that can help you with that. And then last slide here, and then we can take some questions for a moment. So what can educators do now? Learn more about CPA Evolution. Go to evolutionofcpa.org and familiarize yourself with the initiative. Sign up for the Extra Credit newsletter. It's free, and virtually everything that we do is going to be covered in Extra Credit, so you'll be up to date. Visit the Academic Resource Hub and check out those resources. They're free. You don't have to be an AICPA member. You can access those. These educator webinars, the faculty hours, continue to come to these. Check out the most recently issued CPA exam blueprint. which can give you an understanding of the types of systems knowledge and analytics knowledge that's likely to be in the core of the next exam. Keep up with the development of the model curriculum in a couple months, and then we'll have that out, and then get involved with academic volunteer opportunities. So with that, Anna, I am going to see if there's any questions.
Yes, we had a few. Carl, there were a lot of questions about the timeline of the blueprint exposure, and this is not acceptable in terms of curriculum development for faculty to have the first look at the new blueprint mid-2022. So could you please reiterate what we are trying to do to help the faculty with that?
Yeah, understood, and it's a fair point. We've heard that since the kickoff of the initiative, that if we wait until 2022, that's not enough time. So the thought is the model curriculum that we're reaching out with and that we're launching in June, we've got exam team representatives serving on those task forces. Members of those task forces will serve on exam subcommittees that are digging into each one of these areas, each one of the disciplines. So that at least gives you guys a pretty good understanding of what's likely to be on the next exam, even though it's not yet final. So that's kind of the way to think about that.
Could you briefly cover our tentative plans for the curriculum rollout, maybe?
Yeah, so we'll have more on this at future events, but at a high level, our game plan is to offer a virtual event that will be jointly sponsored by AAA, AICPA, and NASBA, and that event will be in mid-June. So more to come on that in the future.
And Carl, there is another concern that if the blueprints are getting developed and the practice analysis is shifting the learning objectives and topics, how can we be sure that whatever the curriculum we are issuing in June, what if we tell people the wrong things to teach?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think, again, the way to think about it is the practice analysis and what they're learning from the practice analysis. It's feeding into what is ultimately going to be in this model curriculum, but the practice analysis is still ongoing. So it's going to be an evergreen document, the curriculum that we issue. Is it going to be 100% on point? It's not. The blueprint is really the direction to go for there. But will it be materially on point? I think the answer is probably yes. So that gives enough time to think about, do we need new courses? Do we need new faculty? Do we need different textbooks and so on?
Okay, thank you, Carl. One last question before we move on. What resource do you recommend for faculty to share with their students to learn about the evolution of the CPA licensure?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. If you go to evolutionofcpa.org, we've got a 2-page document. It's just kind of a canned 2-page document for anybody who wants to learn about that. It's a flyer, so that would be an easy way to share some information with your students so that they're familiar with what's going on.
This is fantastic. Carl, thank you so much for answering the questions. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we will share the recording of this webinar, so you can share it with colleagues and friends and family and neighbors, because we are trying to build awareness of this. We will share the PDF version of the slides, and I think Anna Monroe already shared the link in the chat, but we will make sure that we will follow up with an email to all the attendees with all the links to the academic resource hub, to the roster of the task forces who are writing the model curriculum, and to all the resources that we have created for the faculty, including the registration for the next faculty hour. So thank you very much, Carl. We, I think, have more questions that we could answer. So I hope that you and I work together on answering them and maybe following up with a document to all the attendees as well.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Carl. So now I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, Meredith Piotti. And while she is setting up her slides, I will tell you a quick story on how I met her. Right about 3 years ago, I worked as a director of the MSA program at Nichols College, a small business school in central Massachusetts. After hearing about large public firms and large schools creating customized master's degrees, we decided to form a partnership with a regional accounting firm as well. The president of the firm wanted the third of the MSA degree to involve data analytics because the incoming graduates were lacking those skills. So it's a small school. I'm a one-woman shop on the Master's of Accounting degree. We have 55 students. I'm the director, the only full-time person. Everybody else is an adjunct professor. So I was faced with the dilemma that many of you in small schools are facing. I could not develop a course on data analytics because I didn't have neither training nor experience with it. And when I was talking to the director of development of the firm about my concern, he said, you should talk to our data analytics queen, Mary. Mary was the head of the data analytics team for the firm with a passion, as the luck would have it, for teaching. With the help of another faculty member, Mary's subject matter expertise, and our combined experience in instructional design, we developed a course on data analytics, specifically in audit, which became a standard offering in our MSA program. So I invited Mary to share her experience with the need for such skills in the hires of her firm, because she's a hiring manager, and her experience and challenges in developing this course. So maybe you can learn from our mistakes. And then at the end, she will provide a specific practice example for the faculty to use in their classroom. So Mary, I'll give that to you now.
Anna, thank you so much. There's so much for me to cover in this short amount of time. I'm going to try to give my best to give justice to the elements that I really think are important in a data analytic course. I know the Q&A has been fast and furious during the first part of the presentation. I'm sure it will be for this. So as Anna said, if there's anything I can't get to, please, we'll make sure to follow up afterwards. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, email me, anything, I'm more than happy to answer questions. With that being said, I will fully admit that the things I'm about to share are my own personal opinions about data analytic course. As Anna mentioned, I definitely have a passion for teaching. I have enjoyed growing up at the firm, Wolf & Company. I started here. I was a member of the data analytics team. I went to an accounting school and had a very brief stint in data analytic courses. And some of the things I will say about the people that I interview were true about myself. So just to give you a little background on Wolf & Company, it is a 300-person firm, regional firm based out of Boston, New York, and New Jersey. We have a data analytics team that assists in the financial audits as well as doing standalone work. So what my personal experience was in interviewing people, I would always get very excited when I had a candidate who was applying for internal audit, which is the role that I sit in and oversee in addition to data analytics, and they had data analytics on their resume. I was very excited that they took a course on SAP or ACL or whatever it was. But when I asked them questions in the interview about what they did with it or how they used it, they were always very hard to give answers. It was always they had followed tutorials in classes and gone step by step and had some understanding of how to use the software if given instructions, but didn't really know how to apply it. So when the person at Wolf mentioned the partnership with Anna, they asked if I wanted to teach. They gave me a little bit of an out. I do have now three children. So they were like, you're too busy, you can't do this. But I was really wanting to do something to change the curriculum so that students were not just learning how to follow a guide on a software, but understood the basic elements under data analytics that you really need to be successful. Because as I view it, data analytics is more of a mindset than knowing how to use a tool. And from my experience in the workforce, I have people who have had no background in data analytics, who I can see how they use Excel or even report writers. And I know right away that they will be a great addition to the data analytic team because of how they approach problems and how they understand data and organizational problems. And I just know that they'll be able to catch up on the technical skills really quickly. So my next slide is actually from Deloitte publication. It is available through that site, but it's something that I really see as a valuable point as a practitioner. You'll see over here that the actual skills related to data analytics are very small in this graph. They make up one small quarter of the skills you need to have a competency over data analytics. The biggest portion that you really need to be successful are business and communication skills, understanding the processes and the problems. And then the other part that I feel is really important is this upper left quadrant regarding testing and validation. And to me, that really means understanding how to make sure that what you're putting into the data analytics software is complete and accurate. So when I approached putting together the course with the end goal in mind of making sure students left the class having a deep understanding of how the data analytics systems operated and how to actually apply them to solve real world problems instead of reading a tutorial and going through, let's face it, accounts payable, HR, those are what you hear every time you hear a data analytic problem. You never hear, okay, how am I going to solve if I'm a bank lending problems? Or how am I going to understand how to report this information in this other area like investments? There's just a very narrow focus usually in data analytics, and it teaches students how to solve one small set of problems where I think a greater emphasis on solving problems in general would help. So I do have 3 key elements that I think are important in curriculum. You'll see it's a reverse triangle here because I really think that understanding data is the foundational skill that you need to have in place in order to build up and get to these other things. So the first step is understanding data. That means understanding how to validate it, understanding where it's coming from, understanding which of the key fields you need to use data analytics. And then yes, you do need to spend some time on learning data analytics tool. I'll talk a little bit more about how I don't actually think that's as challenging as it may be, but we'll go over that later. And then the last thing is actually learning how to apply this. Now, in the course that I designed for Nichols, as Anna mentioned, is a high-speed class. It met for 7 weeks, and I tried to tackle all these 3. And I will say that that was immensely challenging. It was immensely challenging for a number of reasons, given I had students with different backgrounds. I had accountants, I had AP clerks, I had a whole host of people who were coming in with differing backgrounds of undergrad education, as well as personal experiences. And trying to get all through this in 7 weeks is a lot. But it doesn't all need to be done in one course, and you may be able to reference to other courses in your curriculum about understanding data and some of those soft skills that you saw in the earlier slide. So as I go through this presentation, you'll notice I tried to number everything so that you could kind of reference them as almost a menu. So they fall back to those 3 objectives, and then I have sub-objectives that are lettered. So the first part of developing or understanding that data thing is really understanding business processes. And instead of just talking at you and saying, you got to teach this, you got to teach that, I wanted to walk you through kind of what I did in my course to resonate some of these items, to give you examples. As Anna already said, I do not come from a professor background. I was very blessed to have her and another professor at Nichols help me craft my crazy business practice idea into what may actually trend as a faculty teaching item. I'm sure you will have even better ideas, but I wanted to throw out some things that I did to give you a starting point. So understanding the business process. You can't come to data analytics and produce valuable solutions unless you understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So the first thing I had students do in class was flowcharting a business process that they were aware of. So if they were an AP clerk, they did an AP. I had bartenders, I had UPS delivery people, I had everyone in my course. And I said, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter if it's not audit or accounting, flowchart something you know, get a good understanding of what the process is, I want you to understand the different reports, the data, and the key fields that you could look at if you were trying to apply data analytics to them, and what you might be looking for. So if you're doing UPS deliveries, maybe you're really concerned about late deliveries. If you are stocking beer at a microbrewery, maybe you're really concerned about orders being shipped out on time or customers' cash receipts. So every student would come with their own possible risk and write about it, and then consider, based on looking at the key fields, what sort of errors they might find. And this allowed them to start understanding how data was powerful and how data could be useful. And this is just an example. So I used to hate flowcharts. I find them more useful now as I try to explain things to people. But like this example here, I didn't make students, this wasn't a flowcharting class. I didn't make them use the right symbols. I wasn't upset if they used a canister versus 2 pieces of paper. I just said, I want to understand, I want you to visualize the process and write it out. So that's my only 2 cents on flowcharting. I just wanted to make sure no one thought I was trying to make them teach a flowcharting course on top of everything else. The next part is making sure they identifying correct data. So in a lot of exercises I would bring up data sets, and some of the problems with canned data analytic problems that are out there is that the data is always really pretty. The data always ties, net income always ties out. You always have the right number of fields. So there's these validation checks, and you can find some great validation exercises out there, but everything ties. So in my course, what I did was I actually took one of those validation exercises. I went in and I mucked up the data. I took out entries, I made blank fields. I just basically deleted data so that students actually got comfortable with finding errors, because in a lot of courses that just didn't happen. I also, within the class after they did that exercise for homework, I would talk through processes of, well, what if I told you this? You know, okay, the write-up said that there was 81 stores in the data and you found there was 83. Well, what if I told you they had closed 2 half year and opened 2 more? Now, are you concerned about the 83? So I got them to question underlying assumptions in the data and allowed them to find anomalies. And that's a great exercise of pulling through the data and getting a good understanding of what is actually there. And I just wanted to pull this up just to, again, provide you with some visualization of how you could do this in the course. So I don't know if I alluded to this, Wolf & Company has a lot of banking clients. So banks, loans are near and dear to my heart. So this is an example just from a trial balance, commercial real estate loans. So I did the math for you, so you didn't need to search for this. So this other commercial category are these 2 muni loans and C&I loans. So at face, you know, this foots, it ties out, it may look all appropriate, but if in class you note or you say something like, you know, commercial loans should really be commercial real estate loans and all other types should be in the other commercial, well, that now puts this data in a new format. And that would actually call out that these 2 ones should be the ones that are tying to here. And this 11 million is misclassified and should go over to commercial, other commercial. And that's the type of things you can do in class or do as exercise to get people to understand that basic assumption. Knowing more about the data can change your perspective on if something is correct or not. I'm trying to keep my eye on time because I do want to make sure I have time to go over the Alteryx exercise at the end. The last thing is just getting to know the data. So as I alluded to, there are great validation exercises out there. I know Anna alluded to the education hub that the AICPA is putting together. You can get your way to these exact examples. These are 2 that have validation exercises ingrained in them. They are helpful with getting people to go through the mechanics, but as I alluded to, some of the issues with the validation exercises is everything is nice and pretty and ties out, which doesn't happen in the real world. So I do encourage having students get uncomfortable, but this is a great easy step to get them to understand what elements of data need to be validated in order to incorporate it in data analytics. So those 3 elements are really that foundation that I was talking about, the skills that you need to know before you start playing with a tool. Now, I will say, as I transition over to the next one, is obviously you have to teach data analytics tool. They need to understand how to use different things. One of the elements I taught in my class was Excel. The reason why I did it is because I knew everyone would have it. As I mentioned, I had a broad array of people in the class, and there are so many data analytics tools out there that it's difficult to pick one for a course, because who knows what the person, where they're going to end up and what system that they'll have once they get there. So I made sure that they knew Excel. And the reason why I did that was for the accessibility, but also to go back to the point that I said, that I really think learning the tool is important, but not as hard. And is if you understand how to do techniques in Excel, like filtering or joining, that there are complementary tools like that in the data analytics system, and you're going to easily be able to pick it up. Yes, there'll still be a learning curve. Yes, you'll still need to do something, but you'll be able to get there. The how I did this is actually, there were some great free tutorials that I found online. They're listed in my resource page afterwards, so I didn't have to spend any time putting together an Excel tutorial. It was available. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is just when I did this. So I already alluded that I think data is the most important skill. Understanding how to identify it and use it is critically important. However, starting a course talking about data and how to validate it is very boring, for lack of a better term. So I actually would kick off my course with a background in data analytics, and then I jumped into Excel. I knew students were going to be excited to learn something, and that getting right off the gate with data validation wouldn't be that exciting. So we started with a tool, one that people were familiar with. People would have some basic skills that they could build upon. And then I transitioned back. I almost took a step back with everyone and said, okay, you've had some fun. Now we're going to go back to the foundations and make sure you understand these other things. It doesn't have to be done that way, but I did think it was valuable to get people into a tool and off and running. As I alluded to, there are so many different data analytics tools out there. A lot of these services will provide education and student licenses. At the firm previously, we used ACL. We still have ACL licenses. A funny thing that me and Anna were chatting about when I was prepping for this, she's like, oh, you guys use IDEA at Wolf. And I was like, oh, no, we don't. And the reason why that was a funny discussion point was in my class, I chose to use IDEA. I had never used it before. I had no exposure to it, but again, I've been boasting about the fact that one system is as good as another, and I figured it was time to put my money where my mouth was. So the first time I taught the class, I did the IDEA tutorials along with every student to make sure that what I had said was true. And it was. I've never used IDEA, and I completed the tutorials in under the time that I told the students it would take them to do the tutorials every time. So I do think that there is flexibility between these systems, and that it is better to understand the underlying terms than to pick a particular software. But you can check them out. Again, they all have free tutorials and guides. So as you're constructing your course, you can see which one plays better with you. Some of them do different things. So IDEA and ACL are designed for audit. So they do very good if you're teaching an auditing class. Alteryx is a little bit more broad. It is built for audit. It has really nice flows. It's the software that we've transitioned over to at the firm, and I love it. But it also plays outside of the audit space. Tableau is more of a visualization software than a true analytics software. So again, what you're going to use is going to be very dependent on what you're trying to teach and where your students would ultimately end up in their careers. But the big thing that I want to emphasize is, sure, do the tutorials, but really you want the students to understand the functions, because I will tell you that between IDEA and ACL, which I both know intimately now at this point, the names of the functions are 95% the same. So if you understand what a join is or what a filter is, you're going to be able to do it in any data analytics tool, and the tool itself is not that important. The last thing that's really important is the problem solving side. So again, I did have them do the tutorials, but after we finished doing 1 or 2 tutorials, instead of just keep going through more and more tutorials, I had them do and design their own tests, which is what I'm going to share in a few moments as we walk through it, is actually walking through a real live test. I will admit this gave students massive anxiety. They did not feel comfortable. They did not often feel qualified to design tests from scratch. But by giving them small bites and saying, okay, you did this in tutorial, apply it to this other issue, it really built their problem solving skills so that they weren't just going through the motions and not learning it, but using it to substitute items in their real lives. Now, I did teach an audit class, so a lot of what we talked about was how you would handle inventory or how you would do something regarding approvals and things of that nature. But again, I tried to have the students take this back to their everyday lives, because not everyone that I was teaching in my course was going to be an auditor like me. Some of them were going to be accounting managers and other things. So I wanted them to understand. And again, kind of going back to that first exercise that we did regarding them flowcharting a process that they were familiar with. Well, now I wanted them to think about how to actually apply analytics and solve a problem. So they would propose what they would do, and on the chat boards, they would kind of help each other out with, oh, did you think about also doing this? Or you could do that. And I found it a really useful item of that forum to have that open discussion where students could help each other out.
Mary, we have a polling question. I just wanted to call everyone's attention to it.
Thank you. I've been doing a bad job. I will announce the polls from now on. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was troubleshooting problems. So again, like I said about the validation exercises, the tutorials always stop at the end of the analytics. So you run a data analytic process to identify duplicate payments. And you get a set of numbers, and they're always really nice. You know, you run the tutorial and you've got 10 duplicate payments. Data analytics is great. You got to review the whole population. You got 10 problems. Wow, I can tell you in real life, a lot of times when you run it on 1 million transactions, you do not end up with 10 problems. You end up with 10,000 problems. And you have to go back and think about, okay, I've got 10,000 problems. Is this process complete baloney, or did I mess something up in my analytics? And that's really where I spent some time in class talking about just the issues that you can run into, issues with getting data, missing data, having false positive. And what a false positive is things where you build your analytics and you believe that you understand the process, but really there's flaws in it. So I put some examples down here, and I actually have the students, as one of their assignments, go through a tutorial portion. So I'll cut out a tutorial and it'll say, these are the steps, these are your answers. Again, 10 duplicate payments or 10 invoices that were improperly approved. What are some facts that could change those from being exceptions? So some possible examples are outdated internal documents. Something looked like it was not properly approved because your approver list is old and it's changed. So all your data is wrong because somebody got a new limit, there's new people added to the list, all these things. Potentially, you could have duplicate payments because 1 week of data accidentally got uploaded to your analytics software twice. Or 1 week of data wasn't added to it. So if you didn't do the validation check on the data to start with, you may not have identified that you're missing information. Or you could just totally misunderstand the process. You could think that invoices under a certain amount don't need to be approved, but they do, or vice versa. So it's really, this is really where those soft skills come into play, that if you don't have those soft skills of understanding the business process, interviewing people, doing all your research before you build your data analytic tool, that you're going to end up with a very messy end product. Because when you talk about data analytics, no one talks about the disaster that happens when data analytics goes wrong. And I actually present this a lot of times when I'm talking about model validation and data analytics in an evolving world. Is, you know, we've been talking about data analytics for so long. I graduated from college 15 years ago and I took a data analytics course. So 15 years ago, people knew that data analytics was important. But here we are, you know, these quotes are from 2019, so they're 2 years old now. But look at these numbers, 87%, 77%, 80%. Just where people try to do these big data, AI, data analytic products, and they fall flat people are not successful out in the business world doing this because they don't understand all the skills that come around data analytics. That's not just putting it into a machine and hoping that big data spits out an answer that's great for them. So it's so important that we support academically these other skills that make people smart, productive data analysts so that these projects can be more successful and that they're more successful themselves when they get out into the professional world. So this is a slide of some of the resources that I use for my class. I did also put the academic resource hub because Anna tells me that it's going to incorporate all the things that I went hunting and pecking and around for. So I am so excited to hear that people will have one place that they can go. But the thing that I really wanted to mention is the class I taught had no textbook. It had no, set course instruction on it. I picked and chose things from around the internet and great sites like EY Academic Resources, KPMG, Hub Analytics. And I put together what I liked and what I didn't like, and I tried to construct something that would get me to the end product that I wanted to. Two things that I added here that I didn't use in my course, because one of the hardest things that I find teaching data analytics at Wolf and teaching it in the course structure at Nichols was finding data. Finding clean data, you don't want to be sharing someone's personal data. You don't want to be messing with any regulatory issues in that. So to find good data that's meaningful, meaning it's not just 20 records, is hard. So I put this National Oceanic Administration and the ICPSR, which have great troves of free data so that your students can use it and actually have something to play around with that's meaningful. On that note, I'm going to get to some of the womp womp part of teaching. So this definitely wasn't the easiest thing to do. As I mentioned, I was very full of gusto and definitely ran into some things as I went along my path. But some things that I want to warn you about right away. The data set for the exercise that I will go over is actually very small. It's probably the size that I'm making fun of a lot of times. It's got maybe 50 records and it doesn't have a lot to it. A lot of exercises that I did in class had much larger data sets. Unfortunately, in the world of academia, what I learned really quickly is some of the systems that are used for facilitating information to the students do not play very nicely when you try to give the students very large data sets. I definitely crashed the systems at Nichols a couple of times. I had files reject out. I had all sorts of issues that students would call me, email me and say, this file is supposed to be there, but it's not downloading, or I can't find it. Or so having a system that will support using large data is important. If you're going to teach a meaningful class, my biggest recommendation would be to understand the data file transmission and storage capabilities of the institution you're working with and play within those. The other thing that was a really big struggle for me was analytical tool capability. And what I mean by that is that I would say 95% of data analytic tools are not compatible with Macs. And if you're at a program that doesn't give laptops out to your students and it's a bring your own device environment, you are going to probably have some students that only have a Mac device. And it is a struggle. And I will tell you that in all the semesters I taught, no matter how often I said, if you have a Mac, this will be a problem, there were some students that would get down to the part where we were working with the analytical tool that had not solved their Mac issue. And it led to a lot of anxiety on their part. It led to some anxiety on my part as a new professor, because having students upset with me was something I had to learn to adjust to. And then the other thing I somewhat already alluded to regarding allotting time and varying skills. They were definitely a struggling trying to get through all this stuff in one class. Is that I think it would be easier if it was able to be divided into multiple classes. I've heard in the Q&A and in the comments that, changing curriculum and things like that is very difficult. So whatever method you can get to doing it. I'm just saying one size will not fit all, and that you do need to give a lot of thought into how you're going to fit all these components that I do think are super important, but making sure it reaches students at the end of the day. Because if you're breezing through things too quickly, they're not going to get the value out of it. And that's my goal as a hiring manager, is to have people sitting in front of me who can talk to me about data analytics. And maybe they can't talk to me about everything, but if they were really good at 50% of it, that would be great. So the last thing that I wanted to spend some time, and I'm actually I think on schedule, so that's exciting, is the class exercise. So this will actually be uploaded to the Academic Hub if it is not already. And I just want to preference with, and I asked this when I was doing the rubric, or what we call the grading scheme at Nichols. I asked, can I give a grade for being creative in data analytics? And I got a couple of weird looks when I asked that, and they said, well, it's your rubric. You can do whatever you want, but we've never seen that in an analytic course before. And I said, well, I'd really just like to reward students for taking a chance. I'm less concerned about them getting the right answer, that there was 10 duplicate payments, than for them coming up with a new and novel way to use the data analytics tool. That's my outcome. My outcome is for them to be able and be comfortable. So I want to reward them trying and failing. And that's somewhat what this course is about. So this example that's uploaded has some examples in it. I'm going to go through some examples that students could do, but basically all that I gave them in my course was, okay, here is 2 audit examples, objectives that I'd like you to look at. I would like you to look at this set of expenses, and I'd like you to verify that they were only submitted once and that they're properly authorized. Those are your 2 objectives. Go with your team, and I split them up into teams, sometimes pairs, depending on the size of the course that I was teaching. And I said, go design whatever you're going to design. Just make sure it's in line with these. And it was a really great experience to see what they came back with. And it alludes a little bit in the write-up, but actually this was a multi-class project. So they'd go off, they'd design their tests. I'd actually have them come and present. So there was other objectives also. So they'd each have a different objective, and they'd present to the course. One of the other groups would be charged as they're in charge and be responsible for evaluating, providing feedback on their presentation. They'd go back after that course, update their planned approach, rerun everything, and then submit their final results as the final project. So this was a way of really supporting them through it and giving them some assistance, so that although this sounds daunting, oh my God, before this data analytics class, I hadn't even opened anything besides Excel, to now saying, okay, I'm going to take a stab at going off and looking at the tutorials and seeing if I can apply something like this. But knowing that the professor is going to look at it once before the final project's due, I'm going to have other students helping me in the first place, and then another set of students giving me feedback on it. And then I'm going to submit my final project. And I did the grading, so it supported that. Again, the first thing was just try. Just give me some ideas, explain them well, and I'll give you credit, and I'll help you move it along. And your classmates will help you move it along. And I found it to be really helpful. I found the students all did a really wonderful job in it. And especially having that kind of touch in allowed some students that maybe were off course to get back on course for the final item. So I'm going to walk you through how you would do this exact item in Alteryx, which is the new software I'm having. So this is an example of the deliverable. So this would be the deliverable for the first part of the project. So they'd have to write up, and this is called an audit program. That term may be daunting, but there's a template in the example, and it's literally like just this. It's an Excel sheet that has, audit procedures and just some examples. So, letting you know what data file they were using, how to do it step by step, so that someone could go behind them and recreate them. And I actually usually did check to make sure that this all tied out. And then in class, they would actually present and show, just like I'm going to do right now, of how you'd actually do this in Alteryx. or whatever system they were using. So in Alteryx, what I liked about Alteryx versus some other data analytics tools, if any of you have seen them, is that it's very visual. It kind of gives me the feel of, Tableau's a visual software. It comes out with nice outputs. This still fits into the old Audit analytics things. It has a lot of the functions and features you need, but it's pretty and it's really versatile. So the first thing you do is you go into this in and out tab, which is pretty self-explanatory. You do a data input, which is this nice book, and you upload the file so that you can start your little flow here. And then after you have the expense report, next poll is launching for everyone. So make sure that you answer that for your CPEs. Then once you upload it, you do this data validation item, which just makes sure that everything is up there correctly. And then this next button is called a data cleansing item. And data cleansing is the reason why I like Alteryx so much, is that in a lot of the other software, you could do things that are advanced techniques called scripting, or in Excel, it used to be macros. So you could set up things to auto run. But in order for those to work in the older systems, everything had to be exactly the same. So you'd have to have the same report, the same headers, things like this. This data cleansing icon in Alteryx allows you to take any file and make it have the headers that you want. So it almost switches, I like to say, Portuguese to Spanish or whatever you need, so that the analytics can work with whatever you're having, because it's almost a translator. And it makes it so that you don't need to spend so much time in formatting and things of that nature. So the initial start in Alteryx would be to upload the file, make sure it's complete, and then make sure the data was normalized or in the manner that you wanted to. And then, like a lot of other systems, what you would do is you do a find duplicate submission. So this little snowflake is actually a comparison. And what you're able to do is check off on which fields you want to find duplicates. So in this example, where we're trying to find duplicate expenses, we've picked expense types, dates, amounts, and to the same vendor. Now, you could take the approach of, well, maybe someone's trying to sneak an expense through, and unless the vendors' names are exactly the same, it's not going to flow. So maybe you don't want to do vendors and you only want to look on date, expense, and amount. So this allows you to very quickly go back in and change what you're doing the duplicate on and see what your end results are. And that's what this binoculars are. These are the browse. It shows you what your end results are. So you can see that based off this test, I currently have 22 records displayed. And I can adjust and say, oh, maybe my assumption here was wrong, and I can quickly change what I'm looking at. And that's one reason why, again, I like Alteryx, because it's very easy, quick fixes. Other softwares, IDEA, ACL, can do the same thing. It's just you'd have to go back and actually go to it and rewrite your script in here, where this is just a little bit more toggleable. I don't know if toggleable is a word, but I just made it one. And then when you get to the final result, so you'll see that there's 22 records displayed here, and it pulls it all up nicely on the screen so that you can see what they are. You can also encourage your students to dive in a little bit deeper to root causes. So you can see that a lot of the duplicate payments were on 523. You could maybe see trends in the expense type right away. So previously, when you got examples, and again, as I alluded to, this is a class exercise. The data sets are small, but in real life, you could have 1,000 records that come out, and having this quick information may allow you to do some of that false positive things that I was talking about in life. So I would encourage, if you've got a data analytics tool that does this, it's a great way to facilitate exercises over false positive, is to show some of these items and things of that nature. So this would be the result. So at the end of the day, when they were turning in the final project, this is what I'd be looking for them to pull over if they were identifying duplicate payments, using the approach that I outlined in here. As I said, they could decide to not include vendors, and if they didn't include matching vendors, this record number would be higher, and that would be okay. That would just be a different approach that made sense. The other element of verifying appropriate approvers, we're going to follow the same process of updating the expense report. If you were to look at the actual file, there's actually 2 tabs in it, so that's why it's in here twice. The first one is the actual expense entries that look like this. The second set is a authorization list. So it shows, you know, Harry has an approval limit of 200 and George has an approval limit of 500. And so this time it's double input so that you can compare the two. This purple item is a join function. Another thing that I love about Alteryx compared to some of the other systems is just in IDEA or ACL, if you were doing a join, you'd have to say, I want to join both of them, any record that's in either one and make one combined file. Or I want to know all the entries that are in the first file, but not the second. Or I want to know all the files that are in the second file and not the first. With this one, you see these little letters down here. You can quickly, again, toggle and say, I want to see all join records. I want to see missing records from the first. I want to see missing records from the right. And you're able to quickly do all that instead of having to, again, rerun the analytics over and over again. Right here, we did a join on all so that we're able to compare what is the sum of the expenses versus that approved. So you'll see we take the sum amount and say, is the sum amount over the limit? And if the sum amount is over the limit, then we want it to go out to this browse item. And then for this one, we actually got 3 records where the person approving it authorized it for more than what their limit is. So you see down here, there's one for 824. This person's limit was only 500. Again, people might take a different approach within this file. Some other alternative suggestions that they could come up with is there are some people who have 2 names. One is HMV and one is HV. Could that be the same person? So if they take the time to do some of that data research, there's certainly a bunch of alternative approaches that they could take. These approaches that I went through today are very basic approaches. They'd be almost what you would find in a tutorial. It's very run-of-the-mill, these are issues. But students could be more creative with the data set and find alternative things. And I would greatly encourage you to reward curiosity in that process. So this is just an example of the end deliverable that they do after the course. So again, you know, the write-up that I showed at the beginning is here. And then instead of just having the write-up of what I'm going to do, there's an extent of what testing is. So they found 22 payments. They took a look to make sure that the data looked correct, that they didn't have anything crazy in there. And then what they were going to do. So, you know, some of the duplicates had a blank vendor name. Maybe that was a bad data input. I'm going to ask about that. And then I'm also going to check about the ones that had a vendor name and had a true duplicate. And that is the end of my presentation right now. I'm sure I see a lot of Q&A, so I'm sure there's some there. I don't know if there's some that I can jump into right now, but I will stop sharing.
Mary, I tried to group some of them for you.
Wonderful.
So let me ask you a few, and let me start there. Undergraduate level, graduate level, level of data analytics needed in each one, and I guess it complements with the critical thinking capabilities at different ages. At what point, what are the expectations that you have? Should we introduce data analytics in the principles course, and how? And what kind of skill levels are we expecting students to have?
Yeah. So I've seen this great diagram, and I actually think the AICPA put it out. So I will give credit to you. I hope it was you. If not, I'm going to give credit to you anyways. But I will say that I saw a diagram that shows the shape of the accounting firms. And so the accounting firms used to be a triangle, and I saw a really nice diagram of it becoming more of a hexagon. Was that is it AICPA?
We issued one, yes.
Yes, I thought so. And I'm 100% on board with that. So yes, basic knowledge, the first year that you get to an accounting firm, I don't think your #1 obligation will be data analytics. There's a lot to learn. There's definitely things for people to keep busy with. But very quickly, and to be successful, to be in that middle team of the hexagon, these are really skills that'll help students progress really quickly in their professional team. I can let you know that anyone who has started at Wolf that has been a successful member of the data analytics team has done very well and progressed very quickly. So I don't think it is bad to teach them in the undergraduate team. Being a data analytic person, I would love if everybody who came to my interview desk had data analytics skills, but it's definitely not a necessity. It definitely could be taught more in the graduate course when people are, you know, probably a year or two in and coming back to the graduate course and starting to think more seriously about their CPA and are more in that, you know, second, third, fourth year, depending on where they are in life. So it doesn't have to be an undergrad, but I wouldn't complain if it was.
Okay. Another question. Were you teaching students in face-to-face modality? If so, can you imagine the students doing well in an online synchronous, a Zoom environment? What about an online asynchronous environment?
Yeah. So I taught completely online. My course was 100% in Zoom. The course was why I understood Zoom before COVID hit. So thank you, Nichols College, for my Zoom education. And it definitely was, there were struggles. I don't know that the struggles would have been any different if I was in person. And one of the hardest, I alluded a little bit to the difficulty, but one of the hardest things was I was teaching something that a lot of students were uncomfortable with because they hadn't had it in undergrad. And I would really try to have a discussion-based class, an interactive class, and to get students to talk was like pulling teeth. So one thing that I found to be really helpful and that I loved Zoom for, and you could do it in live classes too, is that I would present a problem, a review of the homework, whatever we were doing, and I would put it out there, and then I would send everyone to breakout rooms. And I would have them meet with 3 or 4 of their peers. That way they could troubleshoot the question, they could get some real answers. And then when I brought the groups back, the level of conversation and answers I got was so much better because one, every group was expected to report back, so they felt like they had to. But two, I just felt the confidence level in the responses. You know, you can hear it when someone's not sure, they're tentative, you're pulling them. They would present really great ideas. So I would highly encourage when you're teaching something that's outside students' comfort zone, that was something that worked really well for me.
Very good. Another several questions are revolving around data analytics tools, Mary. And somebody mentioned that, is that true that ACL is more used in public accounting, IDEA is more used in internal audit? What kind of tools are useful for the new hires, I guess? What do you see students needing to know?
Yeah. So I will be honest. I've been at Wolf for the last 14 years, so I've been exposed only one, but I did go to an accounting driven school. A lot of my friends were accounting majors. They went to the Big Four and they went to other places. Across the board, I didn't see a lot of synergy regarding what tools people were using. I will say ACL and IDEA were very prominent between those, just because they are designed for audit. IDEA is made by an accounting firm. ACL grew up from that. And actually, you'll see a lot of the spinoffs, Alteryx, a lot of the newer items have someone who came from ACL or IDEA. And I'm sure their non-compete got over with, but they took some of the things they loved from those softwares and spun them into other areas. So you'll see a lot more emerging technologies. I think I saw something fly up through the chat regarding, you know, how many companies are using Alteryx. I don't have numbers on that, but I transferred Wolf to Alteryx because I heard so much buzz about it. Actually, part of my course, I always had a guest speaker come in because I got tired of talking for the whole class. But no, I figured students wanted to hear someone who wasn't from audit. So I'd have a practitioner from the field come in, and one of them raved so highly about Alteryx that I had to get it sampled for my firm. And we are transitioning because I do love it. And I do think it is the direction that a lot of places are trending in. So I definitely think that it's a great resource if it works for you. But it's, again, teaching another tool, picking up Alteryx for me wasn't difficult either. So I think it's more teaching the foundation skills. And if you're more confident teaching in one software versus another, to go with what you're comfortable with.
That is a great segue to my next question.
Wonderful.
Henry asked, what do you suggest is the best way for a faculty member to prepare in order to teach more data analytics in the curriculum? Any and all suggestions would be appreciated.
Yeah. So everyone loves this answer. It depends. I think the first thing I would do is, since I really truly believe how, and there's a new poll question, so just everyone's that there is such a transition, my number one suggestion would be to find something that you're comfortable with. I think if you can stretch yourself and can do what I did a little bit, and for my first course, I did the tutorials and idea. It took me, 15 hours or so to go through them. But I just, a couple of days a week, I went through the tutorials and I made sure I knew it because I didn't feel comfortable teaching something that I didn't know. Doing that and knowing a different software, did I really need to do that? Probably not. But it made me feel good to do it. So I did. So I think if you are passionate about it, if you're going to be teaching a lot of courses, if it'll probably make you feel more confident if you could take a couple of courses. Alteryx, I know we're posting items, has something for education. It allows you on there, and there's some tutorials. You can get your own free license. You can go through and learn yourself. I know there's some great certificate programs and things that you can learn and do that'll help give you some of those basic skills yourself. So I think it depends exactly what level you're starting off on, how far you need to go. But there's definitely certificate programs out there. There's Excel courses if you don't know Excel, or some are just doing some of the assignments that you're going to do, and you can kind of gauge your skills and understand how much assistance you'll need.
Okay. Another question that just came up, how helpful is it for students to be exposed to programming languages such as Python? Do you see that as a need in practice?
Yeah. I will say from my experience as a regional firm, we don't have a large amount of people who do programming. Are there special projects and a niche skill regarding it? Certainly. But I think there is a smaller item regarding that currently in accounting. Now, with the digitization of the world and everything going on, during COVID, there was a course to teach my 6-year-old programming, and maybe I should have, because maybe that's where the future is going. So right now, no, but in 20 years, programming probably going to be imminently important. So it's just in a changing world of everything. I think, we joke about the day, and my class probably hates me because I always love to bring up how it took us so long to transition from physical work papers. When I started at Wolf, the last year we had physical work papers, and our team was young, and it took us 2 years to get people to stop signing off on things in red pen and just do it on the computer. And these were young people. So, I think manual procedures will be around for a while, but programming and data analytics are going to continue to be a further focus and be really important. So I think anything you can do to move the bar in that direction is great to have in your courses.
This is another great segue to the next question, Mary. And I know that you created not one, but 2 courses for Nichols, and the other one was Future of Data Analytics. So we had questions around, all right, we're teaching Excel, we're teaching Tableau, Power BI, Alteryx into data analytics. What do you see the future being for the accounting students, accounting professionals? Are we looking at AI, augmented reality, machine learning? What do you see?
All of the above. All of the above. So I often, so again, I come from the banking space, so I have a lot of over model validation, which is a big portion of banks. There's a lot of requirements. They're closely interrelated. And I talk a lot about how AI and machine learning are becoming the norm. So usually how I explain it in that course is data analytics is kind of the first step up the stairs. And then, machine learning is the next level on that. AI is the next level beyond that. And I think as auditors, there's going to be an intrinsic need to understand how they work. Now, does everyone need to be an expert in advanced analytics? No. But you have to understand, again, going back to the elements that I think are so important in teaching data analytics, you need to understand the inputs, what assumptions are necessary, and maybe you don't understand everything that's going on within the machine, but you need to have a general idea of what the machine is doing. So I think having introductory courses on advanced emerging technology is so important so that you can be up to speed and able to tackle different clients, because clients are going to be using it, accounting firms are going to be using it. It's just going to be so intrinsic.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering the questions, Mary. And I wanted to share that this case that Mary shared here will be available on Academic Resource Hub, and we will include the link to it in our follow-up email. Now, back by popular demand, we have a few minutes, and I wanted to bring Carl back because we had several more questions regarding CPA Evolution and the model curriculum, Carl. And I was wondering if you could address whatever you can address in the 5 minutes we have left.
Yeah, happy to do it, guys. And thanks so much for everybody who submitted questions. We really do appreciate them, appreciate all the feedback, and especially, ideas when you have suggestions on ways that we can support you through this transition. Always listening to those. Going through just real quickly some of the ones that were voted up more than once, questions about timeline and concerns about timeline. And certainly if we think about, trying to make changes after the blueprint is first exposed in mid 2022, that's a real challenge. I would suggest to folks now is the time to start having these discussions within your accounting departments. When the model curriculum comes out, is it going to be 100% on point with what the blueprint will ultimately be? It won't, but is it going to be 80-ish? Yeah, it probably will. It's going to be close. So that's a good time to start working on those changes within your program and get those changes made to the extent that it's needed. We got a question around salaries, and do we have concerns about starting salaries? I heard from the former chair of the AAA. He looked at his starting salary back in 1980 and compared it to salaries today, just adjusting for inflation, and it was effectively flat. In comparison to lawyers, and I think he looked at data analytics, investment bankers, and they had seen significant growth. So obviously, we want to see CPAs coming out of school, accounting graduates coming out of school, and be valued by the marketplace, and that is something that we're working on and that we're aware of. There was a question about if I'm a smaller university or smaller school, I may not have budgetary capacity to hire additional faculty. Completely understood. And it said, for the folks who are developing the model curriculum, please emphasize that many of the folks developing the model curriculum come from smaller schools and community colleges and other universities like that. And the emphasis is going to be on laying it out in a format where effectively you could get it done within the 30 hours that are required for an accounting program in most states. So to the extent that new skills are needed, that's kind of the thought behind these faculty hours. And it's also the thought behind the certificate programs. And if there's additional suggestions and ideas on the best way to get folks the competencies they need in those areas, obviously we're always listening. And then the last one, there was just a question around, should it be taken into account what the purpose of an accountant is, what's the core of accounting and so on. And for folks who had any questions about, the degree to which we're going to cover accounting in the core, I'd really encourage you to go to our website, evolutionofcpa.org. The presentation we gave today was really assuming everybody had heard of CPA Evolution. You've heard the background, you understand what will be in the core. Check out that website if you have any questions questions about the degree to which accounting is going to be covered, because there will still be substantive accounting coverage within that core. So Anna, those were the ones I saw voted up more than once.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carl. I wanted to join Carl in thanking you all for your input, and especially to those participants who provided helpful insights in the chat with the resources they use for their classroom, so other faculty members can see that. Thank you very much. And I saw that a large portion of today's attendees is attending our faculty hour for the first time. So I'm encouraging you to check out the page with the archived webinars for faculty that we have. I'll have a link in the follow-up email as well, because in September we had a deep dive webinar into CPA Evolution. Last August and last October, we had excellent webinars on critical thinking and how that is being taught in schools. And in January, we had a CPA Evolution update from Carl, and a similar to what Mary did with data analytics for audit, we had a deep dive into an Excel case for the classroom. So just to give you an overview of what's coming, our next faculty hour webinar is on April 30th at 2 p.m. We'll have a link again in the follow-up email. Jan Taylor Morris, our academic in residence, and Professor of Accounting at the University of Richmond, Nancy Bagranoff, will discuss the wide array of tools and resources AICPA makes available for accounting faculty. I also wanted to give a plug for the May faculty hour, because we're planning on having a May faculty happy hour. So that the details are to come. And at this point, I would like to thank Carl and Meredith for being our presenters today. Thank you so much for your time and for your input. I would like to thank our producer, Anna Monroe, and Kristen and Julia for helping me answer the questions. Thank you for helping to produce this event, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.